Now, let's begin the process of creating the second revision of our files. I'll start SolidWorks Explorer from the Tools drop-down menu. Next, I'll browse for the drawing called Assembly Drawing. I'll right-click the assembly drawing and select Copy. When I do, I'm prompted to either copy it and optionally copy its references using Pack and Go, or I can do a normal copy and paste it manually. I'll click Yes to use Pack and Go to help me select the files and references I wish to copy. The Pack and Go window will appear, and all of the children of the drawing are listed. You can see in the list on the left that the assembly drawing is at the top of the SolidWorks hierarchy. That is, the assembly drawing is listed above the assembly, which in turn is listed above the individual parts. You'll see in a moment why it's important to start with the file that's at the top of the hierarchy. Of course, if there was no assembly drawing, the top document would be the assembly, and we would start with that file instead. Notice that if I would have started with the assembly, the drawing file would not have been listed here. Here, I can choose which items I wish to copy. Anything with a check next to it will be copied. In this case, the component that is causing the assembly and the assembly drawing to be revised is Part 100. That said, I only need to make a copy of the assembly drawing, the assembly, and Part 100. I do not need to copy Part 200 or Part 300 since they'll be unchanged. Since I'm not making copies of those files, the assembly pointers will point to the new copy of Part 100, and will look to the original folder location for Parts 200 and 300. Next, let's deal with the location and names of the copies that we're about to create. Before I do, I'll give you another recommendation. Since we'll be creating a second version of some of these files, you might be inclined to give them special names with a revision prefix or suffix, such as Assembly REV2 or Part 100-2. But I urge you not to include revisions in your file names. While this may be a convenient way for you to distinguish one version of a file from another, this technique will make it very difficult for you to import your data into formal file management software in the future. I recommend instead that you use a new folder for your revisions, leaving the file names the same. Since I want to avoid changing the name of the newly copied files, I won't use the add prefix or add suffix fields. Instead, I'll click the Browse button and create a new folder named Revision 2. This is the destination folder for the children being copied. Now, I click Save. To make sure everything worked out as planned, I'll browse into the Revision 2 folder and click on the assembly drawing. I'll click the References tab, and you can see the assembly being referenced is the one in the Revision 2 folder. If I click the assembly, you can see its references are listed as well. Part 100, the one I intend to change, is in the Revision 2 folder, while the other parts are still being referenced in their original location. One more thing I'd recommend doing is adding a revision property to each of the newly revised files. This can also be done here in SolidWorks Explorer. I'll click the assembly drawing and change to the Properties tab. I'll double-click Add New and type the name of the property, revision in this case, and its value is 2. I'll repeat the process for the assembly, and Part 100. Although these new copies do not contain revision numbers in their file names, they now have an internal property that identifies their revision. As with any other custom property, you can reference the revision in drawing notes, a bill of materials, or wherever else it might be necessary. To conclude this lesson, let me repeat that this is only one example of how to manage revisions. Some of the nice elements of this method are that the file names are preserved, files that are not modified are not unnecessarily duplicated, and you're left with the history of your revisions that you can always go back to. Give these items some consideration if you decide to create your own file management procedures. You'll be glad you did when you implement PDM software in the near future.